All right, good morning. It is 11:30, so we'll go ahead and go on with our next session here. I'm your room manager. My name is Kevin O'Shea, and I am pleased to introduce Dr. Barrett Caldwell. Dr. Caldwell is professor of industrial engineering and also aeronautics and astronautics at Purdue. His PhD from the University of California, Davis is in social psychology, and he has BS degrees in aeronautics and astronautics and humanities from MIT. Dr. Caldwell's research team, the Group Performance Environments Research, Grouper, Laboratory, examines and improves how people get, share, and use information well. Grouper research highlights human factors engineering approaches to information flow, task coordination, and team performance in settings ranging from healthcare to spaceflight to STEM education. Dr. Caldwell is director of the NASA-funded Indiana Space Grant Consortium, promoting STEM education throughout Indiana. Today, he will present a talk titled Being Martian, which is taking on special interest with the release of the upcoming movie, The Martian. Please silence your electronic devices, but don't put them away. We want to see you tweeting with the hashtag Dawn or Doom. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Caldwell.
Microphone should be working too. Okay, so thank you all for coming. It looks like I've got a go board on video, a go board on audio. I'd like to welcome you all here for, I guess, the last talk in this series, and thank you for being willing and eager to continue to be victims or at least participants in what we'll call our favorite thing. So I'm going to start with some caveats, some disclaimers, some of that stuff that I need to say. One of them is, in fact, that NASA pays me sometimes, but not for this. So I don't get to be the official NASA spokesperson today. The administrator, Charlie Bolden, is on campus, so shh, don't tell him that I said anything that sounds official. Okay? Second, I might be talking about people I know. So I'm not going to say anything really bad because they might hear about it and I want to keep working with them. And finally, some people have managed to see The Martian. I haven't yet. And I don't know Matt Damon. I don't know Andy Weir. If you happen to know those guys, call me, okay? We'll set something up. It'll be great. Lots of people like to talk about Martians. It's been a long-standing thing. And our Martians have been ominous. Our Martians have been destructive. Our Martians have been humorous. Our Martians have been just absolutely horrible, disgusting, and pathetic. No, sorry, that was the movies, not the Martians. Okay, so we'll go back to ominous for a moment. We like talking about Martians. We like talking about the concept of life on this planet that is somewhat close to us, somewhat like us, but very, very different. We're fascinated with Mars. But our real history of having Martians isn't that long. In fact, this is the first real Martian photo from Mike Viking, launched in 1975. I guess this would be the first version of a Martian selfie, since that's Viking's landing pad. And for reference, and I really appreciate Dave Wolf going right before me, because he's the one that makes it okay for me to make all sorts of music and cultural references as we talk about this Martian census. Okay? Yeah, there's 6 beasties. I like to call little robots beasties because I love them. They're fun. They're exciting. But they're robots. And that means they can do some things and they can't do some things. Now, if I go down that list, I can say, wow, this has been a fantastic run. This is not all the items that we've tried to put on Mars. It's not all the attempts of exploring the red planet. They're the ones that have survived fairly well, which is also a testament to how hard it is that you have a total of 6 Martians over 40 years. Now, as we say Viking, there were 2 Vikings that were launched in August and September 1975. And thank you, Dave, for mentioning Pink Floyd, because one of the other things that was very famous in 1975 was the album Wish You Were Here. Sorry. This is called an 8-track tape, which is not just humor about our audiophile capabilities, but I want you to think about that from the perspective of what was the state of the art in technology when Viking was designed, built, and launched. As it turns out, Dave and the guys have a human-robotic collaboration mentioned on the very front of this 8-track label. I think that's cool, along with Welcome to the Machine. And Wish You Were Here. Pathfinder. The Martian Pathfinder mission also got the nickname Sojourner. Launched in 1996. Her final transmission was 18 years ago. No, that's not. Oh, my goodness. I'm about to feel old because, you know, I was there. I even had the T-shirt. I also wanted to give you another reference. Well, that's PlayStation era. And those of you who remember PlayStation 1, that was cutting edge. That was a big deal. That was major hardware. Okay. So the other reason why I wanted to talk about Dave, and I mentioned this somewhat in the intro, is that if you go to the Martian, you study a movie about humans on Mars, you ought to bet that one of them has a connection to Indiana. You really should, okay? Dave's from Indianapolis. Mention Gus. Gus is from Mitchell, along with 21 astronaut colleagues that have spent time in Indiana. So what does NASA do? They have a big deal press release, astronaut with Matt Damon, right? This is cool. This is wonderful. It's a random astronaut, right? This is the LA Times, so, you know, they're not from around here. This is a random astronaut. Oh, no, it's not really a random astronaut. It's a Purdue astronaut, because that's where we are. In fact, this is Drew Feustel. Drew is a member, an alum of the College of Science, from Earth Atmospheric and Planetary Science, and of course he loves to advertise where he's from, because, hey, we're Purdue. But it also means that there is a touch of home. There is a touch of somebody in this room, somebody young in this room, could be one of those people going to Mars for real. I like his chances. I like her chances back there. What does it take to be one of those Martians, though? Right? We've talked about, oh, well, we have a few Martians made of silicon and aluminum and titanium. What does it take to be a Martian? Whether or not you're one of these kids or one of those robots, it's hard to go to Mars. It's hard to live on Mars. It's hard to be part of the environment. It's hard to survive the elements of the red planet. So some people would even say, why bother? We've been there, right? I gave you a census of robots. There have been 6 robots. We've been there. It's okay. We did that. Let's move on. I'm not saying that these are my reasons. I'm saying these are reasons that I've heard. Okay? Well, the other thing is we don't need humans. The robots are great. The robots are fantastic. The robots will get even better, and the robots will get so good so soon that everything a human can do, a robot will be able to do better. In addition to that, human error. Oh, humans, they're the weak link. They're messy, they're nonlinear, they're difficult to program, takes a long time to repair. They're filled with, yeah, they're gooey and emotional and all that stuff. Robots don't even need food. It's great. You pack a few grams of a nuclear power source and they're good to go. And one of the other ones that you hear often, why waste the money in space? I'll start with the last one first. And just to start from one comment, we don't launch money to space. It's too expensive. It costs thousands of dollars per kilogram to launch anything to space. So we don't spend money in space. Besides, there are no ATMs. When we spend money to do the space program, it is for education, it is for research, it is for engineering that teaches us lessons on Earth. So I'm going to start with that. Being Martian is about learning to be a better Earthling. So let me give you a little bit of a reference here. Earth and Mars have almost the same land mass. So Mars is a much smaller planet, but it's land. Earth is larger and most of it's water. So if you were to look at the places that humans can wander around on land, it's about the same as the places that humans can wander around on Mars. Okay. Earth, Mars, about the same size, at least in terms of landmass. Kind of, all right. So this is a picture of Earth. That arrow is pointed kind of in Utah, near the Great Salt Lake. Imagine that you get to go there, walk around for a week, 1 week, and then describe Earth. All of Earth, to someone who's never visited that planet. Well, you go there in one time of year. Oh, well, we don't know about that white flaky stuff. We don't know about that dark soily stuff. We don't know about those mountain stuff. We don't know much. And we like to know. I like to know. Some of you like to know. That's why you do university. Because you want to know. You want to learn. You want to get better at stuff. So going to that little salt plain, spending a week there, does not teach you about Earth. So spending a little while on Mars in one spot doesn't teach you much about Mars. So I'm going to turn that picture around. Instead of asking why bother, what are the lessons that we can learn by making, building, growing, training Martians? Well, one of the research projects that I've been spending some time on over the past few months, years, I'm learning what geologists and geophysicists, I mentioned Drew from Earth Atmospheric and Planetary Science. Remote sensing, planetary processes. What do we learn about this and other planets? When we add some factors, we take away some other factors, maybe a little bit more atmosphere, maybe a little less gravity, maybe a few more things hitting us, impacts. How does that change the planetary processes? How does it teach us not just about geology, but the other functions that make bodies in the solar system do the things they do? I'm going to talk a little bit more about autonomy, automation, and function. What we really understand is about robustness and resilience. How do you do a good job when, as Neil deGrasse Tyson says, the universe is out to get you? Those are narrow margins of error. You don't get to be sloppy when you do space travel. Time, angle, mass, these things don't support very much in the way of, well, I kind of felt like it was kind of okay. It wasn't that big a deal, was it? So, how many of you go on a vacation? Okay, most of you. I've been told it's a good thing. You should, I should do it. How many of you go on vacation and just get in the car and start driving? You kind of want to know where you're going. You kind of want to know what you're going to find when you get there. And there's no AAA on Mars. So we kind of need something like remote sensing. Remote sensing, no matter what technology you use, it's only a partial picture of what's going on the ground unless you get some confirmation. So you can take a radar, you can take a LiDAR, you can take any of the electromagnetic spectrum images, but you don't know if the soil composition or the reflectivity or the angle of incidence or any of those things is really changing the picture until you do a little bit of ground confirmation to say, yep, when I see this picture, it means this thing. When I see that picture in my trip planner, it means that I'm going to be going to the beach. I'm going to be going to the mountain. You really want to know that because you want to know where the good place to go is before you get there. And it helps you pack for what you want to see, what you want to do once you're there. So again, this is not to make fun of anybody. This is the Mars Yard at NASA Ames, and they're doing a lot of good practice. I hesitate to call it play, but it is play. It is learning by doing where it's safe to fail. So these Mars rovers, they climb some hills, they drive around some rocks, they get good at that. Those algorithms get put into the software to go to the Mars rover. Mars rover gets good at driving on that sort of stuff. So you think you're doing pretty well. You build your rover, you do it here. Does that mean you're ready to do this? This is craters of the moon, one of the roughest surfaces on the planet. But that's where all the cool, exciting, sciencey, ooh, this is what gets the volcanologist going in the morning. It's flowing, crinkled, frozen time. This is what they want to study. And, spirit, opportunity, those kids, I don't know if they're ready for this. In fact, I'm pretty certain that that would hurt. While I'm talking about robots, let me talk a little bit about automation. Electromechanical entities running some software programs. They might be given some commands to move or do some task. So when I talk about automation and robots, I'm just talking about beasties that are built to do a task. Autonomy is completely different. Autonomy is the ability to function independently to complete a current, emerging, or novel task goal. So there are times when a robot operates autonomously. Oh, this is something I don't understand, or I'm running low on power. I'm going to shut down now, and I'm not going to wait for permission. In the last talk, there was a mention of a human looking at a computer screen and saying, that's not what I expected to say. That's not the rule that I was given. And they're asking for some sort of new rule for what to do. Because humans can operate based on procedure, wanting to know what happens next. Artificial intelligence, I'm going to say, is a plot device. It's good in science fiction. We haven't seen it in lots of other places yet. When we incorporate the other two, it gets messy. So imagine Opportunity has been driving around for a decade. Opportunity is a pretty cool robot. She's so cool, she had a Lego toy. And what's amazing is the kids that were too young to play with this Lego toy when it was first released in 2003 are now in college, now college interns doing NASA stuff, and she's still driving. Thank you, you. Why does it take a decade to run a marathon? That's how long she's gone. That's how far she's gone. Because this is rough stuff. And there's no one there to drive her. All the commands are either pre-programmed or she checks back with Earth. Okay, let's get started, and as they say, light this candle. Hold it, didn't we already do that? I just demonstrated the distance today from Earth to Mars. From the time we started talking to the second light this candle is 359 million kilometers. 1,197.5 seconds. Try to do real-time operations. Try to drive your car that way. Try to manage a conversation with your friend that way. Try to update I don't know what to do next that way when whatever you're trying to do could kill you in 10 minutes. Oh, by the way, that's one way. If you want somebody on Earth to help you, we've got to do that again. I actually can't do that again because I'll run out of time for this talk. So, how do we get stuff done given that it's going to be hard? Not everybody is going to do everything right. Not every piece of hardware or software does everything the way you want it to do. So, there's lots of events going on. And experts are monitoring that all the time to do what we call fault detection, isolation, and recovery. Problem is, you don't know what's a real fault, what's a communication error, what is a misunderstanding, what is something you didn't expect. And this is just one individual right now. If you have multiple individuals, you've got to be able to connect agents to agents, autonomous systems to autonomous systems. You need to be able to figure out, have you seen this anomaly before? That's a lot of work. And if we want to keep survival as a primary mission objective, I think that's a good one. We can't eliminate all the errors. We can't eliminate all of the effects of radiation. We can't eliminate all the possible design flaws. They're not design flaws. They're the best we understood at the time we launched with the hardware and software we had. The idea that you can launch a machine and have it driving around on a hostile environment 11 years later, 15 years later, well, sometimes you just get lucky. Dust devils were a really nice feature. Okay? So one of the projects we're trying to work on is to say, How do you do that with those human Martians? Where you've got folks on the ground, a science backroom team, they're the volcanologists, the planetary geologists, whatever it is, and they're talking to astronauts in a hab. They're talking to astronauts out collecting biologic and geologic samples. And it's not talking to the space station, which is a couple seconds away. It's not talking to the moon. It's that 19 minutes and 57 seconds that we just had between MCC ground and the HAB. You better make sure the HAB and the EVA astronauts are able to do a lot of things on their own, because if they have to wait for the ground, it's not going to be a good day. This is what we mean by autonomy and recovery and resilience. You have to have local capacity, local capability to develop new strategies, to replan, to reprioritize, to redefine the goals. I haven't seen the movie, but I have seen a bunch of trailers, and I just got to science it. Yeah. You got to take what you have and figure out what is the best way of changing the mission goals so you can keep the mission going. Maybe you need to build tools. Maybe you need to build tools that allow you to build other tools. You've got to be able to recognize degraded function and alter mission parameters to reestablish and continue functioning, including things that were never meant to do what you want them to do, like pick up an old rover and turn it into your comm system. Okay, I'm turning into a Mark Watney fanboy. That's why it's good to be a human Martian, because you can do that stuff. So let me think about autonomy in two ways. Whether I'm a silicon Martian, whether I'm a carbon Martian. How much can I be on my own? From whom and to do what? Is it just to hang out and conserve power? Or am I going to go and discover shiny rocks that will change the understanding of planetary formation? And who has responsibility for deciding that? Not just in general, but right now. We have to be able, before we leave for Mars, before we finish building, we have to be able to design for flexible autonomy that allows us to do the right thing with the right allocation of function for right now. Even if the world, that world, isn't behaving the way we planned. I talked about the analogs for enabling Mars exploration. You've got to be able to overcome the delay. Right now, we don't even have a good comm architecture for figuring out how old a message is and how valid it will be once it's received. I want an expiration date on my messages. This information is good until. And I want to be able to manage the mission. What's managing the mission? Staying alive, getting to lots of science on schedule. Sometimes the coolest things aren't on the schedule, and I want to be able to do those too. One of our current grad students in EAPS says, keeping track of boring places can lead to an exciting result. So don't ever think that anything's trivial. Everything might help you learn. Now, she can kind of know, because in addition to being a grad student, she's also worked for the company that does the optics on Mars Science Lab, Curiosity. She kind of knows what she's talking about. And that's cool, that we get to talk to people who are learning what it is to be Martian. So let's talk about coordinating individuals and teams. I love teams. I like working in teams. I like working on teams. I like studying teams. I study humans for a living. It's a good jig. So we've talked about function allocation, who's doing what, and it's got to be who's doing what right now. And there's shared situation awareness. Who's doing that and how do we know that? We also want to manage trust, competence, and communication. I know that you know what you know. That's a trust statement. You told me what you know that I don't know. So I know that I don't know, but you know. That's a coordination statement. I don't need to know everything you know to be able to respond to your statements of expertise to help me in my expertise. Now, those are some kind of nasty, complicated, confusing statements, right? This is what we're asking robots to do. But it's hard for people. The beastie up in the corner, I don't understand the mustache, but it's French. I don't get it. It's a robot that's being trained to learn astronauts' tasks on the space station so that it can tell new astronauts what the old astronauts have learned. Okay. But when I hear people say, well, the robot will figure out what the human will need to know, and the robot will make the decision on who should be doing what, go back to that, I know that you know what you know. That's hard for humans. Now, teach a robot to do that by a software engineer, designer who doesn't know how to do that. Oh, that sounds like I'm dissing a lot of tech geeks. Well, I know a few, but again, just from the perspective of teaching a robot to be a good geologist is really hard for a software engineer that's never done geology. It is harder for a software engineer who doesn't do geology and doesn't like to work with other people. I guess that's where we start talking about some of our doom scenarios. Here's another version of human error, doom scenario. We talk about human error as the bad thing. Well, what we actually mean usually when we say human error is that it's operator error. It's the astronaut's fault. It's the pilot's fault. It's the lathe operator's fault. Okay? In essence, that's blaming the victim because someone in a cubicle expected someone else to operate flawlessly in a stressful, time-critical situation with no game reset. You only get one take. And you're asking someone to get the one take, the only take right when they're dealing with terror and vibration and noise and endocrine systems, all that biology messiness. So let's turn that around and say, whose error are we talking about, really? If users are operating in a novel, complex situation on imperfect knowledge, and they don't get the daily edits, to perceive the movie analogy, you're doing a probabilistic decision about what might or might not work. And maybe you've got a procedure to help you, and maybe the procedure is right. So let's be a little kinder to the user and start asking about what is happening with the designers that don't have the same experience and don't have the same empathy for what it's like to live on the edge. Let's think about the managers, and not that I would ever say this happened really, but you can imagine a scientist who's so fixated on their particular research specialty that they don't pay attention to the idea that the rover is running out of power or the astronaut is running out of air because their next paper depends on that bit of science, and they're already imagining the cover story on Science while the astronaut or the rover is losing the ability to ever function again. That's what we would call point optimization instead of mission optimization. And some of those assumptions are kind of brittle. We think that the world will work a certain way, but we don't always know that. If we knew that, it wouldn't be exploration. There's a description about human error as something called a Swiss cheese model. This is from Jim Reason. And it's the idea that you have to have things line up a certain way for an error to get all the way through. So people make errors all the time, and sometimes they get caught. And an error may happen when things make it all the way through. Okay, kind of like holes in Swiss cheese. I'm actually going to suggest that mission success is also like Swiss cheese. You've got to get all these issues lined up, all these designs robust and capable and able to adapt and adjust to get the holes lined up so that you have a mission at all. What happens is that you have lots of tiny things that are unreported that can lead to near misses, bad days, but they were a great catch. We rarely talk about how a human made a great catch to turn an incident from becoming a disaster. And you might guess, I certainly fear, that we don't have a lot of tolerance for disaster. We don't have a large margin for a mission, a human mission to Mars that isn't perfect. I mentioned something about plot device. AI meets autonomy plus error. Any of you who have seen the movie Ex Machina? Yeah, okay. Ava is the AI with autonomy. Whose error? I'd say it's the designer's error because he had prior evidence that a sufficiently well-developed piece of autonomous AI would not like to be trapped in a room and would not like to be told what to do for the rest of their life. But he designed every one of those, and when they exhibited that behavior, he declared that to be a flaw in the AI, not a flaw in the designer, because he's brilliant. He's a brilliant human who's made a critical logic error. And it was messy in that case, but when the movie ends, we don't know how messy it might get in the future. Humans kind of talks about that sort of messy in the future. As you might guess that I would love to talk about this all day. But I can't. And some of you might have some questions, so I want to respect that. So in summary, Mars compels us. People look up in the sky and want to know where Mars is. They've cared about Mars for a very long time. Okay? I mean, the very name suggests that Mars is the stuff of legend and myth. We want to know that. We want to explore that. We want to be that. Conversely, though, what it takes to be a Martian teaches us more than about being a Martian. It teaches us about ways to think about all those other futures that you've heard about throughout the 2 days of this Dawn or Doom. How do we manage brittle, unstable, dynamic challenges? And it's harder than you think. So think about how hard you think it is. It's harder than that. Okay? It's 360 million kilometers, 1,197.5 seconds, grow your own food, live in a Winnebago for 3 years hard. But as there was, in fact, this clip from Kennedy at the beginning of the space age. We do those things because they're hard, right? We go to the moon. We do the other things. Rice Place, Texas. That was part of the speech. Rice had a better chance of beating Texas this year. But hard work makes you work. Makes you learn. You don't learn by things that are so easy that you can do it right every time. So the expectation of perfection is one of the first missteps down the slippery slope. So the effort to be Martian helps us figure out how well we learn worlds and how well we learn ourselves. Whether or not it's a human with footprints or a robot with tire tracks. It helps us learn ourselves. Not just the physical things, the holes in the rover tread, the demise of spirit, getting stuck, because it's a more complex place than we expected. And by the time we figured out where spirit was, we couldn't get her out anymore. We learn about our own hubris. We learn about our own mistakes. We learn about our own promise and our own passions. And usually, we only get one take. So let's make that take count. Thank you. So I'm supposed to ask if there are questions?
If you have questions, we do have a microphone we can pass around, so that way you can ask Dr. Caldwell all about Mars.
I knew that you would eventually step up. Yes?
What do you see politically happening with our exploration of Mars in the next 5 to 10 years or so? Because, I mean, we've talked a lot about the technical challenges and the human challenges, but the politics is really what we're stumped on right now.
Yeah.
What do you see happening?
That's a great question, and it's probably one of the questions that I worry the most about. We have a Congress that wants to allocate budgets based on short-term priorities. This Congress will not see a human land on Mars. But this Congress's decisions will influence our budget, our research, our development cycles about whether or not we can make the next window. The orbital dynamics don't allow you to launch from Mars every day. It allows you to launch from Mars, well, with humans, maybe every 15 or 20 years, somewhere in there. If we get better with engines, we might be able to shrink that a little bit. But that means you have to put some money into that research. It's hard to grow food that people can live on. You need to put money into that research. Radiation's pretty nasty. We need to have ways to protect against that. You need to put money into that. You cannot just turn it on. And that's what I fear the most about short-term budgets, is people playing politics with budgets to say, well, I'll trade you this budget this year for this other budget next year. And if that's not bad enough, what I also fear is that, Charlie, are you in here? Oh, good. I fear a NASA that's too afraid to say, either we do it right or we don't do it. You can't do everything for nothing. You can't be perfect on pennies. And so I do fear that as we keep saying, well, do it for less, we want to do it. I want to do it. If NASA called me tomorrow or today and said, Barrett, we need you to go to the space station, I'd do it. I'd do it for free. I would. But it's not cheap. And if we keep saying we'll do it for less, at some point, we can't do it for less.
Those are your fears, but what about the solution? Because I think we all have that fear. We can't act on fears.
No, we can't act on fears. When I talk to members of Congress, some of them get that, and more of them are willing to get that. But I think some members of Congress need to be reminded that we benefit more by long-term investment in the pretty, rather than responding out of fear. Question?
I got two questions for you, sir. One, I would just like to hear your thoughts towards rather an international approach to this problem rather than just the U.S. And then the other thing is we always hear this big problem with, trying to talk to Congress. Well, usually the problem kind of exists for, what are they, like 94% lawyers or something like that? They're not really engineers anyway. So when you're dealing with people like that, money talks, right? So how do we motivate them, and how do we when talking to anybody outside more or less the science community, the money part is what's going to talk. How do we get that almost economic type of backing to where, like, hey, this is profitable for you, try to do these types of missions?
Okay, so let me answer the first question, do I believe in an international? I believe that, the best minds, the best creativity, the best capability doesn't have a citizenship. At no point was the U.S. space program a purely U.S. venture of purely U.S. citizens. You look at the population of this university, one of the leading universities in that spaceflight research enterprise. This is an international venture. I go back to MIT, it's an international venture. Go to Caltech, it's an international venture. So I think it's simply true that by default and de facto, it's international. to get to your second question about money talking, I did mention that we don't launch money. It's too heavy and too expensive. So where does that money get spent? Where are you located?
You mean like living here?
Well, yeah, you're at Purdue. Where were you before that?
From Detroit.
Oh, Detroit, a manufacturing enterprise where precision manufacturing, friction stir welding, for instance, changes how we can make cars. It also changes how we make rockets. So the work we do to build better rockets that are safer, more reliable, and more robust can help change how we make cars in Detroit. Every piece of research that we do doesn't just stay on a Mars mission. It's in these phones. It's in these water bottles. It's in the quality of the water in the water bottles. It's in the food you eat to make sure that, unlike past generations and past eras, we don't have to fear the water we drink and the food we eat every day. That's where that money goes. And that's what some of our more conflicted members ought to understand. Yeah.
How is the commercialization of lower space orbit, how is that affecting NASA and the Mars exploration?
How is commercial spaceflight affecting Mars and Mars exploration? I would say that I've actually not met that many people at NASA that think that we shouldn't have commercial spaceflight, any more than you look at people at the Air Force who would say that we shouldn't have civil air transport. Right? A lot of that work was done in one environment and is transitioned into another environment. Now, if you want to say in terms of direct competition, the best we've done in commercial spaceflight has gotten us to roughly 1965 in terms of payload we can launch to orbit. It is a partnership. It's not a competition. So to the extent that it's a partnership, and that means NASA does not have to do all of the rides themselves, all of the engines, all of the payloads, all of the mission profiles, all of the stowage themselves, it means that the limited budget that NASA has can now be also devoted to those other things. And I think that's a good thing. In the back.
Do you feel that there's a time crunch on our species' survival and that space exploration is necessary?
Do I believe that there's a time crunch on our species' survival and that space exploration is necessary? I believe that space exploration is highly desirable, and that to the extent we do it well, we'll learn more about survival of this species. Sometimes you want to say, oh, well, if you mess it up, it's on you. So I think that it's desirable, it's informative, it's educational. Whether or not we want to survive is a different question.
What's your take on the viability of the Mars One plan, the one-way trip to Mars?
The one-way trip to Mars. Max, bear with me for a moment. I think there's a whole lot of people who would want to do that mission. Yep. The people who are best suited for that mission are not necessarily the people who would sign up for that mission. And it's really hard. It's really hard to design a mission where success doesn't feel like success. And from my perspective, I picked what I want to do with my life on Christmas Eve 1968, watching Apollo 8. Okay? I have in my head, not just we do these things because they're hard, but we choose to go to the moon. We will put a man on the moon and bring him safely back to Earth in this decade. Going there is a third of the job. Going there, living there, coming back is the job. I think we have one more question. It's a long way to go just to visit once and stop. It's a really long way to go. Let me use as a comparison Antarctica. Because Antarctica has been more or less continuously inhabited for about 45 or 50 years. No one stays there for more than a year, unless they're really hardcore. It's really hard to stay there. And we haven't used the same facilities in exactly the same way. So there's new research capabilities which require new research facilities. There are people that come in. There are windows where you can't go anywhere and nobody can come get you. And then there are windows where you can come back. So I can imagine an intermittently populated research facility. We may get to a point where there are enough people that they get to stay there and be real Martians. But if I were going to think about the earlier questions about species survival, if I want enough people there to carry on a species, that's not 5, that's not 10, that's a couple hundred, because I need the genetic diversity for that group to be sustainable. I have no idea how we're going to launch 200 to 500 people in this century. So let's start with a foothold before we build a town. I think that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.